All right, I want to show you guys how to throw a dinner plate. This is probably one of the more challenging pieces we go to throw because everything's a little different. How we hold our hands, the speed of the wheel. So for this assignment, you're going to have to throw something that's about 9 to 10 inches in diameter. So the centering process changes a little bit, and then of course the weight. So what I have here is about 2.5 pounds of clay. That's about what you want to go for. 2 pounds, you'll probably waste a lot and you'll probably not have enough to go with. You can go up to 3, but you're going to make more of a platter shape with that. Now, like I said, we're going to be shaving a bit, so 2.5 is a good starter amount for the plate we need to go for. Now with 2.5, I will probably throw a plate that's about the size of my bat, which is about 12 inches, so somewhere between 11 and 12. So for this, once again, get your clay down on the wheel. Give it a couple love taps, and let's get centered. So at this point, hopefully you're pretty comfortable with centering. The same method still kind of apply. We're going to have the heel of our left hand kind of pushing in, the side of our right hand pushing down, but this time we're going to let this left hand kind of drift back, still applying some pressure as we kind of flatten the piece out into a disc. So let's get our clay wet. Let's just get it in the middle of the wheel first. Okay. So, and always remember to kind of float away, and that'll help you know. And then we're just going to kind of compress the clay out into the disc. And just like with anything else that you throw, the size of the foot of the piece usually determines what you throw. So if you center your plate right here, that's how big your plate's going to be. So I'm using a lot of pressure. You can see me kind of really putting my shoulder into it. You can also see how the clay is kind of creeping up on my wrist. So I'm almost going to kind of include my forearm in the centering. But don't have your arm too far forward. Don't have it kind of all over the piece. That pinky knuckle is still going to kind of stay center there. So I'm going to continue to compress the piece here. But this left hand is still there to try to keep it from getting too wonky on the outside. So my end result when I'm centered is about a 1-inch thickness on the disc and fairly flat in the top. Okay? It's okay to have a tiny bit of wonkiness on the outside, but it shouldn't be moving all over the place. No hula hooping there. Okay, at this point is the diving and the opening. And this is where it is a little different. Whereas traditionally we dive with our fingers or our thumbs, for this one I actually like to dive with my knuckle. I feel like it's a little stronger. So I kind of dive with this fourth pinky knuckle. It's going to dive down into the piece. My other hand is going to kind of cup it. I'm going to use the strength of both hands and dive a little bit, but open a bunch. So if opening's been something that you're kind of like not quite sure about, it's really key for this. So I try not to make a little tiny hole. This helps make a bigger hole. So with really wet hands, really wet clay, kind of apply pressure here in the middle. And then I'm just going to very slowly pull my hands towards my body. Now I can kind of pull it more towards like 5 o'clock here, and that's fine too. Okay. So you can see some of this clay kind of came up in the middle. I'm going to compress that a little bit more. Okay. And then go back in for another dive. So I dive a little bit, and then I kind of, hopefully you can kind of see I'm using this edge here as I open it back out. Now the difference with throwing a plate too is the middle of the wheel where you traditionally work isn't going as fast as what's out here. So a little physics for you. So it is going faster out here. So when I actually go to pull my piece, I'm going to slow the wheel down a little bit because it's going so much faster. So at this point, I've got a fairly flat bottom. If it's not flat, feel free to just kind of use the side of your palm here and compress that clay. Now you don't want to push it so far down that that gets really thin, because when we go to flip it over and trim it later when it's leather hard, if it's really thin, you'll shave right through the bottom, which is always very sad occurrence. So if you're not quite sure how thick it is, remember you can always stop your wheel, you can grab your needle, and you can poke, okay? About the thickness of your index finger, like you would any place else. So feel free to measure in multiple places, and then to close that up, just apply some pressure with a wet sponge. And we'll clean that up too and make sure it's really flat when we're all done. Okay, so now comes the rim. And this is very subtle, okay? You want a very slow spin. So traditionally when you're pulling, you want a slow speed. You want to make sure it is slow for a plate. Because like I said, it's going faster out here. Same as when you're traditionally pull, you want to be about 4 o'clock. I'm going to kind of cut under a little bit with my outside right hand. My left hand is on the inside. And instead of traditionally pulling up, I'm going to pull out at a 45 degree. So I'm going to try to gather that clay. So kind of cutting under there. So it's a very short pull, but it's out at an angle. Okay. Very wet, and it's hard to get water on that underside, so sometimes I have to kind of drag my hand and kind of rub some water on that underside there. Now, the reason I don't want to pull it straight out is because of gravity. So gravity can easily pull it down. So I always try to be very cognizant of how thin and thick this rim is. So you want a slight taper. You don't want to cut under too far. We can take care of that later with trimming if you do want a real drastic rim. But in the meantime, we just want to get the general shape of what we want our plate to be. Now, if the rim is uneven, you can take your needle tool, and this is where it's a little different. When we traditionally trim cylinders, we trim from the outside. When I trim a plate, I kind of support underneath with my hand. Hopefully you notice I'm not stabbing the needle in straight. I'm kind of angling it away from the spin, and I cut down from the top. And just like regular trimming, let the tool and the wheel do all the work. I just gradually work the tip of the needle into the plate. And the nice part about this is all that falls to the back. So I might have a little extra sticking on there, but that's all right. I can kind of just slowly peel that layer off. Throw it in my basin. And then we can soften that rim. So as with anything, I just kind of hold it, and I'll try to bring my hands out here. Just a light pinch and a softening with the sponge. Now, the very last thing before we're 100% done with our plate is to really clean up that interior. Because a good plate isn't all lumpy, bumpy on the inside. You know, when you've got your big steak and your mashed potatoes, you don't want it to form rings. So what we can use is our ribs. And there's a couple different ribs. You can use the kind of this broad side of your L rib. There are some teardrop ribs that you can use. We even have a few mega ribs that you can use as well. And basically what we want to do here is we want to just create a nice plane along the bottom of the plate. So all I'm going to do here, you don't want to hold it completely up and down like that. You want to angle it a little bit away. And once again, you got to work at that 3 o'clock position so that the clay is going away from you. And you will have to clean your rib a couple times. But I like to use kind of the curved side, because then I can kind of roll it. So hopefully you're kind of seeing how I roll the rib a little bit. When you tend to use this side, you tend to really dig in here and here, and you might get some holes. So I like to use the little elbow there and flatten that out. And if you can leave it kind of that real smooth that's left after the rib, that's fine. If you want to go back in and put your throwing lines in, you can. You can also clean up the rim here. You want that nice, smooth rim. And usually when I throw a plate, I try not to make the rim out here really thin. It tends to chip a lot, especially if you're going to use it daily. So I like to just take my sponge and just give it a nice, not super stout, but just a rounded edge there. And at this point, once you've got all your form done, this can come out probably at like a 15 degree. I wouldn't try to throw it completely flat. If that's something you really desire, that'll be something we'll just let gravity take care of it, let it sag down a little bit. But there's your standard dinner plate. So this one's about a little over 11, almost about 11 inches, so 12-inch bat. I can measure in. The hardest part, I think, at this junction is to then run the wire. because you've got a much bigger surface to cut the wire under. So you do have to hold the wire wider, okay, than you normally have to hold it kind of more in. So I think it's harder when it's on the basin. So my trick is to usually pick up the bat, because the basin will kind of obstruct you. You could either put it at a table or just angle it up as you pull away. Now you do need to offer some resistance. And hopefully you don't see the wire. It's okay to see the clay move, just don't actually see the wire. And there you go. There's your dinner plate.